I am the real noble lady in the story, the true and false noble lady. My biological parents finally found me, and then threw a bag with 500 million at me. Don't ever appear before our daughter again. And just when I thought that was cruel enough, my adoptive mother did the same. Only this time the bag contained 1 billion. She urged me to stay away from her daughter. I stood there watching these people, their indifferent faces, their cold words. And then she arrived. My mother. My real mother. Mrs. Margaret rushed over, red-eyed, as if she was about to hug me. But I had already prepared myself. With a quiet step back, I observed the people around me. A middle-aged man standing nearby suddenly stepped forward. "Nah, we are your biological parents. You were taken away shortly after birth, and we've searched for you for years," he declared. I scoffed. "Nonsense." My voice was cold. "5 years ago, you realized your mistake. But you pretended not to know. If it weren't for your desperate need for a kidney for your precious Sophia, you'd probably never have remembered that you even had a biological daughter." My adoptive mother nodded. "So that's it. I knew it." Mrs. Margaret forced a laugh. "Nina, you finally found your biological parents. Aren't you happy?" I let out a sarcastic chuckle. "Happy? Ridiculous. Did I ever go looking for you? No. You came here on your own." Ethan frowned. "How do you speak to your parents like that? Is this how your adoptive mother raised?" I cut him off. "If you don't like it, you can pretend to be deaf." Without another word, I turned and walked into my house. Without hesitation. Without looking back. Slam. I shut the door in their faces. Half an hour later, I figured they must have learned to speak politely by now, so I let them in. "Sit down." I gestured to the sofa. Ethan remained annoyed. Mrs. Margaret, on the other hand, had already started crying. "Nah, you don't know how much we've missed you all these years. We know you've suffered here. Come home. We'll make it up to you." She wiped her tears with trembling hands. I silently reached for the tissue box and placed it in front of her. "Keep crying. If you run out of tissues, there's more." Mrs. Margaret choked up. "Nina, do you blame us for not recognizing you sooner?" I waved a hand, unimpressed. "Stop exaggerating yourself." Mrs. Margaret looked flustered. She turned to Ethan. A confident smile appeared on his face. "Nah, perhaps you don't know. The famous tuna company in a city? It's ours. When you return, you'll be our precious princess. You'll have everything. No need to live in this shabby house anymore." I sipped my tea, calm and composed. "Really?" I mused. "My grandson wants a plane." Their stunned expressions were priceless. The tension in the room thickened. And then the door suddenly opened. My mother walked in. Her gaze fell on the uninvited guest sitting on the sofa. Without saying a word, she walked over and sat beside me. Ethan immediately turned to her, eager. "Hello, Mrs. Quinn. We are Nina's biological parents. We've come to take her home." He presented a DNA report, launching into his well-rehearsed excuse about how a nurse had mixed up the babies. My mother remained silent, cold, unmoving. Mrs. Margaret fidgeted, then pulled out a check. 500 million. "This is to thank you for raising Na all these years, but we hope you won't appear before her again after receiving this money." I smirked coldly. Without hesitation, I reached into my bag. 1 billion. I was about to throw it at them when my mother beat me to it. She calmly pulled out her own 1 billion check. The air in the room froze. Ethan sneered. "Mrs. Quinn, are you overstepping? Do you think just writing a number on a check makes it real?" Mrs. Margaret dropped the act. Her expression turned cold. "Quinn, who knows if the hospital mix-up was even a mistake? We've been merciful not to hold you accountable. Don't push your luck." My mother's face didn't change. "I gave you a chance to leave," she said evenly. "If you don't take it, don't blame me later." She coughed softly. And then, boom, over a dozen men in black suits rushed in. Before Ethan and Mrs. Margaret even realized what was happening, they were dragged out. The house fell into silence. I stared at the empty space where they once sat. The check was still in my hand. My fingers tightened around it. "Mom." I swallowed hard. "When did you become so wealthy?" She stared out the window, her expression unreadable. It's time for the Green family to go bankrupt. Then she turned to me. If I told you your maternal grandfather was a reclusive tycoon, and I just inherited a huge fortune, would you believe me? I blinked. Then slowly I nodded. Of course. After all, I had already read this story before. I want to apologize for taking 18 years of your life. The love of uncle and aunt that should have been yours. I know you suffered poverty and hardship, which should have been my burden. You deserve to be the princess of the Green family. It's all my fault. Seeing she was about to cry more, I immediately interrupted. Okay, I forgive you. Anything else? Sophia paused, clearly surprised her apology worked so quickly. She hesitated, then continued. Sister Na, if you truly forgive me, why won't you return to the Green family? Don't you know Mom and Dad cry every day longing for you? Are you avoiding me because I'm living there? So I can move out. You and Mom and Dad are the real family. I interrupted again, gently holding her hand. It's fine. Stay there, I don't mind. Why won't I return? I smiled sincerely. It's because I hate poverty and love wealth. The Green family is too poor to support me. As soon as I said this, not only Sophia but also the classmates around us stared in disbelief. You've got to be kidding, someone murmured. After all, everyone knew I was the child of a single mother, a factory worker who could only attend the school through a fee waiver policy for outstanding students. The Green family was a wealthy clan in a city, and Sophia had been spoiled like a treasure since childhood. Sophia froze, clearly unhappy with my nonchalant attitude but unable to show it. You can take a step back for now. I know my sister hasn't thought things through yet. Whenever you want to return, the Green family's door will always be open. With that, she turned to leave. Wait, I said calmly. Classmate Sophia, you're expelled. Sophia turned back, puzzled. When you entered, you stepped with your left foot first, violating rule number 1 of the school. Lower grade students entering upper grade classrooms must not step with the left foot first. Therefore, you're expelled immediately. You may pack your things and leave. In her suspicious gaze, I smiled. Oh, I forgot to mention. This school now belongs to me. A flicker of panic crossed Sophia's face, but she quickly resumed her gentle demeanor. Sister Na, you're too kind. She forced a laugh, turned, and was about to leave. Nina, your friend has arrived. Why not do a few more problems here? I said mockingly. Embarrassed, I used her face to my advantage. Na, isn't your family a factory worker? Why are you running a school now? The class, already excited by the drama, buzzed with curiosity. A few said it was inappropriate, but I ignored them. When Sophia entered, I texted the principal to time his arrival. Sure enough, as she stepped outside, the principal arrived with security, carrying her books as if they had just cleaned her desk. I shouted in feigned surprise. What's going on? Is the principal really here to expel her? Too many coincidences. I almost doubt myself. But was it just a fluke? Why would Nina's words lead to her expulsion? As the principal approached, Sophia frowned but maintained her smile. Facing her gentle, lovely expression, the principal coldly said, Student Sophia from class 12A3, you're expelled. What? Sophia immediately turned to me, then looked at the principal in panic. Sir, did I make a mistake? Why am I being expelled? She clearly didn't take my earlier rules seriously, but as soon as I mentioned expulsion, the principal appeared, leaving her flustered. However, the female lead remained composed. Principal David, could you have mistaken me for someone else with the same name? Our school is private, but we can't arbitrarily expel students. If you insist, at least tell me the reason. Otherwise, my family will be furious. A well-structured response, subtly mentioning the Green family's influence. Truly, the female lead's capability. Otherwise, in the original story, she wouldn't have turned Nina into a discarded organ donor after having her family snatch her organs to save herself, then accused her of being heartless and ungrateful. But now, money's true power made such schemes trivial. Principal David, prepared, said coldly, Throughout this semester, your grades have consistently been at the bottom of the class. Your total scores in all subjects don't even reach 3 digits. Have you truly studied hard, Sophia? Sophia frowned, her eyes shimmering with tears. It's because I've been unwell and had to recuperate at home. Principal David sighed. Actually, if it were just poor grades, expulsion wouldn't be necessary. Our school values college admission rates but doesn't discriminate against struggling students. However, Sophia, your attendance this semester has been extremely low, averaging only 1 day per week. This severely violates rule number 3 of the school. If we condone this, won't all students think they can attend only when they want, claiming illness otherwise? More important than grades is attitude. The school doesn't discriminate against struggling students, but we absolutely cannot tolerate those with terrible study attitudes. Principal David's integrity was clear, but I just wanted to laugh. The school rules state that students with too few attendance days would be suspended. But in the original story, even if Sophia missed months of school, the school never considered expelling her, simply because the Green family was wealthy. But now, someone richer had intervened, and suddenly the school remembered the rules. Sophia's face turned red and pale, clearly realizing the issue. She'd attended so sporadically for over a year. Why was the principal suddenly expelling her now? Did she glance at me, her eyes flickering with disbelief? Sophia, you can call your family to handle the withdrawal procedures, Principal David said, hanging up the phone. Sophia's face was gloomy and unreadable, while I whispered in her ear. So next time, don't step with your left foot first. Remember. Outside the school gates, I was blocked by an uninvited guest. Nina, let's talk. Samuel, my biological brother, stood before me, a puzzled look on his face. Why is she crying at home all day? Did you say something to her? A hint of annoyance flickered in his eyes. I know you resent her, but she's also a victim in this. Sophia has a pure heart and never thought to compete with you. Why do you keep making things difficult for her? I frowned, speaking bluntly. Do you even understand what a victim is? She lives in luxury, pampered like a princess in the Green family. How is that being a victim? Coming and going as she pleases, even calling that being a victim? Are you saying I only lost a wealthy family while she lost family love? What are you watching, love dramas? His eyes grew more disdainful, his voice carrying a hint of contempt. Perhaps for someone like you, money is more important than spirit. But Sophia is different. She never thought to compete for anything after learning the truth. She was the first to suggest bringing you home. For her, family love is more important than material things. You shouldn't judge her with a petty mind. Right, I said sarcastically. She values family love the most, which is why, after learning her birth mother was a factory worker, she didn't even call, let alone take the initiative to recognize her. So the love of wealthy parents is true, while poor ones aren't worthy of the term family love? Samuel was stunned for a moment but quickly regained composure. You don't need to meddle in this conflict. I've watched Sophia grow up. I understand her best. Nina, if you agree not to target Sophia anymore, I'll immediately let you return to the Green family. From now on, whatever Sophia has, you'll have a share. No need to insist, I smiled provocatively. I'm not interested. I truly don't understand why the Green family is so confident. I've clearly refused several times, yet you keep pleading for me to return. Is there a hidden agenda? Like wanting one of my kidneys, for example? As I spoke, I observed Samuel's expression. When I mentioned hidden agenda, his eyes flickered with panic. I suddenly felt like teasing him. Leaning into his arm, I said, if I return to that house, you should at least show some sincerity, right? Can't expect me to take a taxi with an old bag, can you? Also, what would be my status? A foster child? Or the only biological daughter of the Green family? Hearing my somewhat weak tone, Samuel immediately became delighted. Rest assured, a driver will pick you up at home. As for your status, it's not good to publicize this. It will affect Sophia's reputation. We can't let family matters leak out. It wouldn't be good for her reputation. What about my reputation? I coldly interrupted. Before you let me return, you must publicly declare in the newspaper that 18 years ago, you mistakenly took the wrong child, and that I am the only biological daughter of the Green family. Otherwise, don't talk anymore. No, you can't bring up that matter, he said. If you do, what will happen to Sophia? I finished for him. She's already unwell. Provoking her like this is like pushing her to her death. Right? Nah, shut up and leave. I interrupted directly, cutting off his words. No more nonsense. Goodbye. Before he could react, I immediately fled, adding, talking to the Green family is just a waste of my time anyway. In a few days they'll come crying and begging me again. Sure enough, after 3 days, I saw the Green family's newspaper announcement. At that time, the Green family and Samuel blocked me on the road again, sincerely begging me to return. Nah, we've announced in the newspaper as you wished. Do you want to come home with Mom and Dad now? We've truly missed you these past few days and worried a lot, they said. I sneered inwardly. If I hadn't read the original story, I might have been deceived. In the original story, Sophia's illness worsened at this moment, and the doctor said a suitable kidney was needed within days for her to survive. To save their precious child, they humbled themselves before me, acting out a parental love drama to lure me home. But I'd already sent a text to my mother, then got into the Green family's car. As I entered, Margaret smiled awkwardly, trying to talk to me. I directly put on earphones, ignoring her. After all, they were now begging me. This was my chance to act out and be willful. Upon arriving at the Green family's house, the servants lined up, bowing, which I ignored, walking straight in. Nah, from now on this will be your home. Mom has already had your room cleaned, Margaret said in a coaxing tone. No rush, I said. Where's Sophia's room? Margaret's face suddenly stiffened. Sophia is temporarily still in the upstairs room, Ethan interrupted. I want that room. Tell Sophia to move out. Hearing this, not only Margaret but also Ethan and Samuel changed color. Samuel spoke first. No, Sophia is used to that room. Suddenly asking her to move would definitely hurt her feelings. She's already unwell, alone in the hospital. How could we do this to her? You've just returned home and want to drive Sophie away. In a few days, will you want to drive us out too? How does a family teach their children? No manners at all. What are you saying? I retorted. Who talks about their own child like that? Nina was a bit excessive, but you can't speak to her like that either, Mom. Don't mind Dad's words. Let Mom show you your room, Margaret said, leading me away. Seeing them playing good cop/bad cop, I shrugged. All right. If you can't bear to part with your precious Sophia, then I'll leave. Goodbye. With that, I turned and walked straight to the main door without a hint of reluctance. The parents were stunned, only Samuel blocking me. Nah, don't be so petty. You've returned home. Why compete with Sophia over a room? Just yield a bit, he persuaded, enduring his dissatisfaction. A room can be yielded to her. This house can be yielded to her. Everything can be yielded to her. I'll leave. You all live harmoniously and happily together. Isn't that better? I'll be on my way. Farewell. Actually, I didn't care about the room, but seeing the Green family suppressing their anger while trying to keep me, I couldn't help but feel delighted. Now, what are you saying? We're the real family. Sophia has lived with us for over 10 years, but she's not of our blood. How could we let her overshadow you? Mom will have her things moved out immediately. Can your luggage be brought in now? From now on, don't talk nonsense, okay? Go see your room now. I also understand your feelings, Mom said, mediating. I didn't let up, continuing to ask, where should she move to? I've already returned. Shouldn't Sophia leave our house instead? Her things can be sent to the hospital for her, right? Hearing this, even Margaret, who always mediated, changed color. Her face turned pale, her lips trembling. Henry smiled and said, Nah, this child. Don't be so heartless. Both you and Sophia are my children. Saying this is like cutting into my heart and liver. Nina, if you must know, Sophia is ill and being treated in the hospital. Yet you deliberately provoke her like this. Do you truly wish for her death? Samuel said painfully. How could someone so heartless be my sister? Naturally, those from the lower class are all the same. I completely ignored their futile anger. Currently, they wanted to keep me, so the initiative was in my hands. Stop wasting breath on me, I said coldly. Only one of us can stay in this house. You choose. Either immediately take Sophia's things away or I'll leave right now. Despite their soft and hard tactics, my attitude remained unwavering. Finally, the parents reluctantly agreed to sever all ties with Sophia and have her things removed. Of course, I knew they were only temporarily conceding, aiming to coax me into donating an organ for Sophia. Did they truly think they'd get what they wanted? I coldly mocked inwardly. In the following days the household had no peace. I caused as much trouble as possible, never stopping. Initially the Green family tried to maintain a facade using words to manipulate me, but soon realized it was futile, and could only endure pretending to be extremely doting mothers. However, I noticed the number of guards and surveillance cameras in their villa increasing daily. I secretly messaged my adoptive mother about the daily changes, appearing indifferent on the surface, until today when I planned to go for a walk as usual. I was blocked at the villa gate. Miss the master and mistress instructed that you're not allowed out today. They have matters to discuss with you, the housekeeper said politely, but her eyes flickered with contempt. I said nothing more, silently sending a final message to my mother. It's time to reel in the net. That evening, as usual, I entered the living room to find the dining table empty, with the 3 Green family members sitting aside, their eyes filled with malice and ridicule staring at me. Haven't you set the table yet? I asked calmly. At this point you're still thinking about eating? You're truly as stupid as a pig, Samuel sneered. We've been acting with you for so long. Do you really think you're the young miss of the Green family? What do you mean? If you don't want me to stay, I'll leave immediately, I said. Humph. At this point, do you still think you can leave, or are you using this trick to threaten us? Malice was clear on Samuel's face. Do you really think you can compare with Sophia? Let me tell you the truth. Over half a year ago we already knew about the mix-up. If it weren't for Sophia's illness and your kidney being a match, do you think we'd bother finding you? So the real reason you were brought back was to donate an organ to Sophia? I feigned disbelief, tears streaming down. You can't do this. I won't agree with that. I ran straight out of the dining room, but after a few steps several guards rushed over and restrained me. One of them injected me with a syringe before losing consciousness. I only saw the mocking eyes of the Green family. When I opened my eyes I found myself on a large operating table surrounded by doctors and the parents. Seeing me they both looked annoyed. My mouth was slightly dry as I struggled to speak. Why me? Why abandon me, who's not your biological child, for Sophia, who has no blood relation? Answering this question is meaningless to me, but for the original Nina, who suffered and tormented over this until her death, I decided to use this method to erase her doubts. Margaret said, Sophia has lived with us for over 10 years. Though not blood related, she's the daughter we love the most. She's obedient, filial and understanding, but suffers from a severe illness since childhood. Meanwhile, you've grown up safe and sound. Why is that? I laughed coldly. Sophia's illness is pitiable, but what does that have to do with Na? Did I cause her illness? I sighed at these despicable people. There was nothing left to say. Doctor, start the surgery immediately. My daughter needs the kidney urgently, Ethan said. Sophia remained silent until then, suddenly speaking up, but the people in white coats still stood silent, coldly watching them. Ethan frowned, sensing something, and Miss Margaret also urgently spoke up. You don't plan to betray us now, do you? A man in a blue-white coat with a mask pulled down revealing a cold face said, Mr. and Mrs. Margaret, you're involved in illegal detention and organ trafficking. Come with us to the police station. As soon as he finished, the operating room door was forcefully pushed open and a group of police officers rushed in, followed by my adoptive mother Quinn. Seeing this crowd, the two of them turned pale. Do you know who I am? Ethan tried to remain calm. I'm the co of Flowers Group. It no longer belongs to you. Quinn snapped her fingers. The Green family owned 40% of Flowers shares, but this morning the last shareholder transferred their shares to me. I now hold 60% of Flowers as shares. In other words, the company now bears the name. Ethan immediately changed color, unable to believe his ears, and hastily took out his phone, seemingly to call someone, but immediately the police beside him restrained and escorted him into a police car. Dealing with such criminals, of course, required the law. Quinn shouted in chaos, laughing shrilly at me. I'll insure you're sued into bankruptcy with tax evasion evidence. Where's Samuel? Why isn't he here with Sophia? If lucky, even though he's not the mastermind, he's an accomplice. Several years in prison are unavoidable. Daydreaming, I stepped down from the operating table, shaking hands with Quinn. Pleasant cooperation. Not long after the Green family's trial results were announced, Ethan sentenced to 13 years, Margaret to 10 years, and Samuel to 6 years. About half a year later, Sophia passed away from organ failure, unable to find a suitable kid at the moment of her last breath. Quinn and I both felt a strange sensation, as if our souls were being drawn out of our bodies, detached from this world. I immediately realized it was time to complete our mission. We could finally return to the real world. Although in those half a year after winning the lottery, Quinn and I lived a life of luxury and pleasure, it was time to part ways. My sister is in City AC, phone number 18 cubic meters exit, remember? And call me okay. Before my consciousness completely left my body, I shouted with all my might to Quinn. I saw her also straining to nod at me. Then let's meet again in the real world, my friend. Outside the story, until Na died on the operating table, I realized the world I was in was just a story, and I was an insignificant supporting character. This story was about the female lead, Sophia, in a group favoring trope where all characters existed to unconditionally love Sophia, or serve as her stepping stones. Unfortunately, I belonged to the latter group at school despite my average grades. Sophia, with scores not reaching 3 digits, became top of the class after being tutored by the male lead for a month at home. Though I was the biological daughter, my parents and brother only cared for Sophia. On the day I returned, the entire family surrounded Sophia, coaxing her, even after decades, you can't just cut ties. No matter what happens, you'll always be our daughter. This will forever be your home and your place in our hearts is irreplaceable. I awkwardly carried my carefully packed suitcase, standing before the door the housekeeper couldn't bear to watch anymore, and led me to a dusty, neglected guest room. As I took out my few belongings from the suitcase, my phone rang with a message. New home, any acquaintances? Everyone here is mom. Mom sent a message, though she can't see me. I forced a smile. Yes, everything's fine. They miss me a lot and kept talking to me. As soon as I arrived, I didn't dare tell mom that I wasn't happy here at all. I really wanted to go home. Initially, I didn't want to return, but my biological parents persuaded me, saying my adoptive mother had raised me alone, which was very difficult. Would she have enough money for my university tuition after so many years? She probably wanted to see her biological daughter too. They convinced me they were right. My mother didn't have much education and worked as a factory worker. Over the years, because of me, she lived very frugally. I still had to go to university. Clinging to her would only add to her burden. More importantly, for a child like me who was taken away, perhaps my mother would prefer her biological daughter to return. But I wondered why, after returning to the Green family for so long, Sophia still hadn't thought of returning to my adoptive mother's side. My mother was alone at home with neither daughter beside her. She must be very sad, right? I hesitated for a long time, finally mustering the courage to ask Sophia, do you want to call Aunt? She misses you a lot. I gritted my teeth. Sophia was hurt by my words and cried uncontrollably. Sister Nina, you don't want me to stay at the Green family, do you? Am I making you uncomfortable? I truly don't intend to compete with you for anything. I just can't bear apart from Mom and Dad. The parents were furious, thinking I was bullying Sophia, scolding me as heartless and greedy, only interested in their wealth. As soon as I returned to the Green family, I wanted to drive their child away. I couldn't clear my name. After all, Sophia was Quinn's daughter. Just for that, I would never harm her. To prove it and stop Sophia's sadness, I tried to treat her well, learning from those around me. Soon after, I learned Sophia needed a kidney transplant, and coincidentally mine was a match. My first reaction was fear. I hid under the covers, secretly searching my phone. Is kidney removal surgery dangerous? Will having one kidney affect life? What harm does removing a kidney do to the body? I was terrified, but in the end I signed the surgery consent form. Because she was Quinn's daughter, I couldn't let her die. But what I didn't expect was that they wanted not just one kidney. Both of mine were taken. I couldn't survive the surgery. It was only at the moment of death that I realized I was just a supporting character in the early stages of the story, a character who could exist or not. My entire purpose seemed to be to donate a kidney to the female lead, helping her gain a healthy body. Not long after I died, Quinn, seeking justice for me, was unexpectedly killed by the Green family. My consciousness, like a vengeful soul, lingered around the old house, unwilling to leave. Then I saw two new people appear in the house, resembling my adoptive mother and me, but with completely different souls. They seemed to know this was a story from the start and were aware of the Green family's heinous acts. They didn't act like mother and daughter, but like a team with a common enemy, cooperating closely to punish the Green family. I quietly followed them, witnessing Sophia being expelled from school, Samuel being punished for his crimes, the parents' sins exposed, their business bankrupt, and the family imprisoned. Sophia, without a kidney replacement, eventually died from exhaustion. The fate that once made me hate but feel powerless seemed easily changed in their hands. Half a year later, they suddenly vanished from the house, leaving no trace, as if returning to their own world. I thought they'd go back to their realm. Thank you, friends from the world I don't know. I wish you a peaceful future. I looked into the empty living room and silently sent my blessing. I thought my story had ended, but when I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in my original body. After those two strangers left, my soul had returned to my body. In that moment, time dilated, and I rushed out the door to my mother's room. Pushing the door open, I fell into a warm embrace. I was back. Everything had returned. My mother and I cried together, hugging tightly. Those two had left us an immense fortune, but both my mother and I felt that being reunited was an unimaginable blessing. If we were greedy for more, it would be excessive. We kept only a small portion of the wealth, donating the rest to those in need, hoping our happiness and joy could reach you, that you too could reunite with loved ones no longer separated from those you cherish. We wish you a lifetime of happiness. Outside the story, when Catherine opened her eyes, she found herself lying in bed, her phone still on. The comment section of the story, the 1,000-character vulgar comments had turned into a single sentence: thank you, friends from the unknown world. I wish you all good things in the future. Had Nina's fate truly changed? Was all of this not just a dream of mine? Eagerly I flipped through other stories, and in my memory the female lead of this book had become Nina, the genre shifting from sweet favoritism to warm everyday life. After exposing her biological parents' schemes and avenging Herself, she donated most of her wealth, keeping only a portion to improve her life. She then relied on her own efforts to be admitted to a good university, meeting a gentle senior with a simple yet warm love, not intense but respectful, growing together. The story's ending was the familiar line, "And they lived happily ever after." It was a cliché ending, but I couldn't help but smile sincerely as her efforts to live kindly were rewarded. Nothing could be better than this. Now the only thing left to do was to find my close teammate who'd crossed into the story with me, playing the role of Professor. I wondered where she was now, if she'd returned to her world we'd promised to meet when we returned to reality, but after waiting a week I stood still, hadn't heard from her. While waiting for Quinn's call, countless details I'd overlooked before suddenly flashed in my mind. For example, the lottery ticket. I thought I was clever to buy the numbers immediately after transmigrating, but Quinn found a loophole, using it to become a billionaire. After becoming a tycoon, she didn't just sit idle but seriously began building a business empire, making me suspect that in reality she was also a powerful female coalesce. So during the half living with Quinn we often chatted, but every time I casually asked about her real name, job or address, she skillfully changed the subject. So in the end I had no contact information for her. I could only wait for her to reach out. Could it be that she was unreliable? I suddenly realized I didn't understand her as much as I thought. Honestly, I was a bit sad. In that half year I truly regarded her as a sister, but she seemed to be hiding something important. More importantly, after so long she still hadn't contacted me. Thinking she wasn't close to me, I decided not to care about her anymore. But when I opened the story reading app, one saw someone had sent me a private message with an address, the sender being Quinn. Clearly she could contact me directly. Why the roundabout way? Curious, I clicked on her avatar. In the past year Quinn had read over 200 stories on the app, leaving comments under each. Her comments were quite odd. Instead of discussing the story's content or expressing like SL dislikes, they were all gratitude. "Thank you, you've changed my fate. Thank you, I wish you find your happiness too. Thank you for giving me a chance to start over." Who was she thinking? Seeing these odd comments I recalled a story. Before transmigrating I'd cursed for thousands of words in the comments, and after transmigrating those curses turned into thanks, as if the Nina in the story was expressing gratitude to me. Could it be that in my heart a sudden realization arose? I followed the private messages addressed to a secluded cafe. Inside there was only one extremely dignified, radiant and generous woman. I swallowed hard, calling out, "Mom, nah." Her bright eyes lit up and she waved me over. "Tell me, what's this absurd story in your head?" A question mark appeared on her face. "Aren't you going to explain your situation first?" That story really pissed me off. None of the female lead's family, friends or boyfriend were good people. The author just piles on tragedies. I waited for the female lead to confront those bastards, but the result was her dying of cancer and being cremated. The way the female lead confronted those bastards was to kill herself, making them regret too late. The author's logic is messed up. Those bastards would be the ones cremated. In the end they only regret, while the female lead, who did nothing wrong, had to die. If they cared about the female lead, why treat her so poorly when she was alive? After her death they didn't even regret but celebrated with firecrackers. It pissed me off. How could the author's logic be like this? Clearly those bastards should be the ones cremated, yet in the end they only regret, while the female lead, who did nothing wrong, had to die. Quinn pulled me, speaking nonstop as she took a sip of water and rested. I hurriedly interrupted, "Sis, don't rush. Shouldn't you explain your situation first?" I slowly recounted the details I'd noticed recently. A slightly proud smile appeared on Quinn's face. "My real name isn't Quinn, but Catherine. It makes sense, just like I'm not Nina but Serena." Catherine is a member of the team in the Novel Bureau's Transmigration Department, specializing in entering controversial stories to rectify situations and change the tragic fates of some characters. But gradually Catherine felt a bit exhausted. Each time she transmigrated she had to deal with all sorts of weirdos and gave up, wanting to resign. By chance she came across my long vicious comment, which she said was extremely sharp, every word like a devil's price, immediately catching her attention. Most importantly, our views on the story and life philosophy perfectly matched, so she secretly used her quota to bring me into the story. During our time together she always concealed her identity, and after returning to reality she deliberately avoided contact, fearing her superiors would discover her rule-breaking actions. Now that everything's resolved she immediately came to find me. In short, her job is to transmigrate and deal with weirdos, changing the tragic fates of literary characters. What she just shared with me is her next transmigration plan. So would you like to join? I looked at her radiant, confident smile and slowly extended my hand. Of course.